For 5 years, he was my gentle, considerate husband, the best dad in our children's eyes. Now, he has become someone else's fiancé, and the way he looks at me holds only scrutiny and estrangement. I'll take the son, the Gu family needs an heir. I've heard that line before. In my last life I cried myself raw right here, clung to his legs like a lunatic and wouldn't let go, and in the end I was left humiliated, losing the child I loved most, with no trace of a body to be found. So in this life, when he once again uttered that alms-like line, "Daughter, consider it the payment for the 5 years I owe you," I didn't make a scene. I simply crouched down, wiped the tears from my frightened daughter's face, tucked her cold little hand into my palm, and kept telling her over and over, "Don't be afraid, Mommy's here." Engines roared outside. I watched the Gu family's luxury car speed away and softly hummed my daughter's favorite nursery rhyme. Ethan took away the Gu family's heir, and I kept my whole world. A line of Gu family luxury cars blocked the neighborhood exit as I was about to leave to clean at a client's house. He said he would take Liam and leave our daughter Nora with me. I agreed. I only said, "Take care," and did not see them off. Then, calmly, he went to the client's house with our daughter. 15 years ago, after Ethan's car accident, he was insistent that I call myself his lover. He clung to me like a child, claiming the scallion oil noodles I made were the most delicious in the world. He would also, when I was mopping, clumsily grab the mop and declare that men should do the heavy work, then spill water all over the place. I quietly followed behind him to clean up the mess, watching him grin foolishly. He gave up the Gu family's comfortable life and stayed with me in this old 3-bedroom apartment. We kept each other company for 15 years. 15 years, bitter and sweet. Sweet enough that I believed I had truly found love. Bitter enough that my body changed, and the youthful bloom in my mind was replaced by cleaning jobs that paid 70 yuan an hour. Until Ethan recovered his memory and the Gu family came calling. I knew he would leave. Because in my previous life, the Gu family had shown up the same way, unannounced. Back then I fell apart like a madwoman. I asked him, why am I holding a marriage certificate and yet I'm treated as the other woman? Why did his 15 years of saying he loved me suddenly become something disgraceful, something unfit to be shown in public, something that could never enter the Gu household? My heart-wrenching accusations became their material for public humiliation. Pain and helplessness were branded into my soul like a hot iron. Until they bullied me to death. I straightened up, a familiar ache running through my spine. The employer was very satisfied, gave me a 5-star review, and even slipped in an extra red envelope. Holding those crisp bills, I felt a steadiness I'd never felt before. Ethan was right, I'm a worldly person. Men, love, a son, none of that will make me better. Only skill and the money I hold can support me leaving this place and starting my life anew. I deliberately took on many jobs, packing up to go home only late at night. I thought that without me there, they would leave quickly. After all, my old rundown room was never meant to shelter someone as noble as him. But when I stood at the window, a warm yellow light was still on inside. My mom stood awkwardly behind Ethan. Their relationship seemed to have shifted, from mother-in-law and son-in-law back to employer and housekeeper. And my biological son Liam was now circling Victoria like a little dog trying to please its master. "Aunt Victoria, is there really that big an exhibition in Paris? Bigger than our school's art museum?" He gestured exaggeratedly. All the manners I had taught him were gone, his eyes filled only with longing for the Gu family. Victoria sat with grace, the smile at the corner of her mouth exactly the same as when she bullied me. Even her tone of voice was unchanged, laced with condescension and casual indifference. "Of course, Liam. The artistic atmosphere there is something your mother, who only knows how to do housework, could never imagine. So you must study hard. Your mother is the daughter of a maid, you mustn't become the son of a cleaner, understand?" Her voice was not loud, but it was like a needle, piercing precisely into my ear. I could clearly see my mother's fist slowly clenching. She wanted to retort, but didn't know how. Yet Ethan was sitting right beside her, and all I saw in his eyes was indulgence and tacit approval. I had seen his contempt for me in 2 lives. The pain seemed to scrub the manure out of my head clean. I stood outside the window without moving. I remembered that in my last life I had asked Ethan another question: why her? Yes, why her of all people? It was Victoria, the one who bullied me in high school. Her bullying had no reason. Ethan's playmate, the babysitter's daughter, the holder of top rank in the grade, any of these could have been reasons for her to torment me. At that time Ethan looked at the red marks on my face, and the boy's eyes were full of anger. He got me a week's leave, and by the time I returned to school, Victoria was already gone. A classmate told me that Ethan had gone to the Lynn family with people, and Victoria had been sent abroad. From then on, everyone knew Ethan treated me differently from others. It was those differences that made me abandon the cautious self-awareness I had clung to. In the last life I grabbed desperately at the hem of his clothes. Long, exhausting labor had left me unable even to cry properly. I only knew how to wail to express myself. I begged him not to go, begged him to look at the 15 years we had together. In the end I asked him why it had to be Victoria. He answered only the last of my questions. He said, Victoria did do wrong back then, but she's changed, and you shouldn't stay stuck in the past. Besides, Victoria and I are a family alliance. If you behave, she won't hurt you again. But before he finished speaking, Victoria came over with a smile, looking me up and down as if appraising a piece of merchandise. Sophia, your mom is a nanny and you're a cleaner, why don't you come work as a maid in our house? I promise I'll pay you the highest wage. Ethan didn't reply, he seemed to be waiting for me to agree. I, who was trying to preserve my dignity, couldn't bring out the word no, when I heard my son Liam's childlike voice. Mom, say yes to Aunt Victoria. She'll give you lots of tips. My dignity shattered into pieces. Even the wedding photo hanging on the wall felt humiliating and ridiculous. Pulling myself out of memory, I used the dim light to separate a lifetime of life and death, and looked them over again. Victoria was talking about art with Ethan. When Liam looked at her, his eyes were full of adoration. Just sitting there, a faint sense seemed to drift from them. They belonged to the same world. As for my 15 years, I had been working desperately to earn money. The once soft, girlish hands had become coarse and rough from years of housework. The cheap laundry detergent on me mixed with the smell of cooking oil and wouldn't come clean no matter how I washed. They and I stood as if on opposite sides of the world. We didn't fit. Ethan was the first to see me. He rose to open the door, but when I brushed past him carrying a toolbox stamped with so-and-so housekeeping, his brows tightened involuntarily. That brief, unconscious movement was full of undisguised scorn. Sophia, I'll give you some money so you don't have to do that kind of work anymore. Every sentence from him sounds like I care about you. But when translated it reads, why are you doing that shameful work again? Can't you just stay home and be my little mistress properly? This hypocritical concern chills and disgusts me far more than any outright insult. I sneer inwardly, show no expression outwardly, and simply walk straight to the corner. In this house, the study belongs to him, the largest table in the living room belongs to the 2 children. Only the little stool in the corner belongs to me. I sent my mother into the room to keep my younger daughter company. Only after watching her leave did I sit down quietly and slowly leaf through the book. Pfft. It was Victoria's snort. A nanny, and pretending to be some kind of cultured person? Can she even read that? My son Liam chimed in, his voice clear and grating. Yeah, my mom can't even recognize all the English words, and she's reading a college textbook. Their laughter echoed through the small living room, full of malice. I stared at the book as Liam's mocking laughter began to merge with that of the man from my previous life. By then it had been a long time since I'd seen Liam. Ethan still gave me money, but less and less each time, and in the end my daughter and I were scraping by. Even so, I naively believed that Liam would miss me. So I painstakingly saved up for 3 months and took a slow train for over 10 hours. But the moment I saw Liam, there was only disgust on his face. He pointed at me and told everyone I was his family's maid, there to deliver his clothes. He even threw all the clothes out the instant I turned my back. Like a clown, I bent down and picked them up one by one under everyone's jeers and stares. I was heartbroken. I couldn't understand how the boy who'd always followed me around, who'd promised over and over that he would buy me a big house and let me enjoy life, could have become like this. I did everything I could to get in as a janitor at his 18th birthday party, just to catch a glimpse of him from afar. I never imagined that one look would cost me my life. At the banquet, at their instigation, that group of rich kids dragged me over and humiliated me. They poured cake and booze over my head, the sticky liquid ran down my hair into my eyes. Fear ran through me physically and I struggled, but they seemed to have found it amusing and laughed without stopping. TSK, look at her outfit, does that add up to $100? Hey, dance for us to liven things up, maid. They humiliated and shoved me like a rag doll. I looked up and saw Ethan standing in front of me. He clearly saw, yet he said nothing. I called his name desperately, called my son Liam, whom I had borne with my life. But all I heard was Liam mutter softly, "How embarrassing." In that instant my whole body went rigid. It turned out that all I had done for him, giving him life and raising him, was, in his eyes, truly embarrassing. Pain piled over me layer by layer. I had never known a person could suffer like this. The last thing I saw was Ethan and Victoria walking back into the growing din. No one saved me. I lay there on the cold floor, and amid countless indifferent or amused gazes, I slowly stopped breathing. Afterwards, those who had tormented me received no punishment. My husband Ethan and my own son Liam together wrote them a letter of forgiveness. They traded my death for a favor owed to the Lynn family. So I told myself, don't assume that blood is thicker than water, don't be a fool and let people butcher you. When I stayed silent, Liam ran over and grabbed my book. I dodged his hand and looked at him coolly. Studying is my own business. It's none of yours. Liam froze. He clenched his fists and stared at me for a while, then suddenly threw a tantrum. What's with that attitude? Aunt Victoria's talking to you. I kept reading. Liam was still a child, with me ignoring him, he was helpless. Frustration and anger with nowhere to vent filled his eyes with tears. Ethan, who had just let them mock me, now walked over. Sophia, have you had enough? Stop throwing these little tantrums and know your place. I slowly raised my head to meet his condescending gaze. Know my place? I repeated softly, then reached out my hand. Give me back the teddy. That doll was the limited edition figure he had given me. Sewn inside was the amulet I had begged for with bowed head 1,000 times on his behalf. I once thought it was proof of our love. Now that I've seen things clearly, I know, he doesn't deserve it. Ethan's face went dark in an instant. It's just a stupid toy, are you really going to be so petty about it? Sophia, how did I never notice before that you're so small-minded? I didn't realize before how petty I was. But over these 15 years, even if I worked 3 jobs a day, the money at home still had to be counted out penny by penny. He needs medicine, needs rehabilitation, needs romance and moonlit nights. All I can do is gnaw on steamed buns for a few cents, fighting red-faced and breathless with everyone for every last bit. He's right, I'm greedy, I'm worldly, I'm petty. But I'm better than him. At least I wouldn't eat someone else's food and then call them petty. Where's the doll? I stubbornly reached out, staring at Ethan. He grew annoyed under my gaze, irritatedly dug out the little teddy and threw it to me. So unreasonable. I caught the doll, my fingertips gently stroking its rough surface. Goodbye, Ethan. I murmured it in my mind, carefully prying open the seam at the back of the doll and taking out the long-since-worn talisman inside. After sewing it up, I ignored their gazes and placed the doll on the table. Your things, I give back to you. My things, I take with me. We're even. The resoluteness between adults no longer carries the ardor of youth, it's more a quiet, soundless struggle. A sentence or two of ordinary words can sever decades of feeling. After that day, we never spoke another word. Not until the day they left. I went to see him off. Ethan glanced at his watch. Aren't you going to tend to your precious clients? Weren't you always unwilling to waste a single minute before? I naturally value my clients. They are our only source of income. But he found it vulgar. Looking at me now with that mocking expression, he merely said, "Quit." Not because of him, but because I was leaving, I had to tie up these loose ends. At his words, Victoria sneered. Fair enough. From now on Ethan can give you a monthly allowance, you can stay home and wait, just take care of me and Ethan, after all, serving people is a family craft of yours. Alright, Ethan, let's go. She shoved Ethan into the car. The convoy finally started, the engines roaring loudly as they vanished at the mouth of the alley. I stared in the direction they had gone. My mother and daughter had already packed and were walking up from behind me. I led them away from the city without looking back. Ethan, Liam. Goodbye. Never to be seen again. Ethan returned to the Gu residence. He lay once more on the $1 million top-of-the-line mattress. Unlike the creaky boards in my old, run-down room that left him aching all over, the silk bedding was so soft it felt like sinking into a cloud. But he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. When he closed his eyes, what lingered in his mind was my pair of eyes, so calm they showed not a ripple. And the faint scent on me, a mixture of sunlight and cheap laundry detergent. Yesterday he had still scorned that coarse smell. Now it had become the only way he could recall those tender days. But for a moment more, an expensive perfume drifted up to his nostrils, so strong it gave him a slight headache. The next morning, the long dining table was laid out with delicate Western dishes. Liam held his knife and fork, looking somewhat helpless. After all, at home our family would gather around the round table, eating and chatting happily. But now this long table seemed to separate everyone from one another. There was a solemnity as if some punishment were being administered. No one instructed Liam on how to use his knife and fork. He grew increasingly flustered and anxious, only then did he realize that no one was receiving his pleading looks. The mother who would tenderly straighten everything for him whenever he pouted pitifully had been cast aside by his own hand. He bit back his tears and tried to imitate the others, but accidentally knocked over his milk. The sound of the glass falling was jarringly conspicuous in a dining room filled only with the clinking of cutlery. You have no manners at all, really not fit to be seen, Ethan's mother said, her face immediately hardening, her eyes full of disdain. Victoria immediately seized the opportunity, gently wiping Liam's mouth, but her words were like poisoned needles. Auntie, don't be angry. Liam is still young. Besides, his mother is such a coarse woman, what decent child could she have raised? Liam's face went white in an instant. In the previous life he had been angry about this too, but he soon grew accustomed to the Gu family's ways and came to resent me. This time, after getting up from the table, he still tried to call me from Ethan's phone. But no matter how many times he dialed, the line only gave cold prompts. Without my reassurance, the Gu family's chill became even harder to bear. He thought of the past 15 years. No matter how late, our family would always sit down to eat together. When he was ill, I stayed up all night by his side. What he had once taken for granted, even found a little tiresome and coarse, in this moment became the embodiment of love, suddenly so clear and precious. I want my mom. Liam finally couldn't hold it and burst into tears at an event. Ethan, irritated by his crying, took out his phone and dialed that all too familiar number once more. On the other end of the line came the same cold female voice. Hello, the number you have dialed is not in service. Ethan was stunned. There's no way she hasn't been able to pick up all this time. From unreachable to not in service, did she cancel the number? Before Ethan could think further, Victoria chimed in with a mocking tone, Oh, Liam, don't cry. Your mother is that kind of person, she probably took a huge sum from Ethan and ran off without a trace. She wouldn't care about you. You're talking nonsense. Liam suddenly burst out, his eyes bloodshot as he shouted back at Victoria. My mom is not that kind of person. She graduated from university too. She's much prettier than you. The smile on Victoria's face froze, She hadn't expected this child she had always cajoled to suddenly rebel. Startled, she reflexively reached out and shoved Liam. "How dare you speak like that, child?" Liam stumbled from the push and fell onto the carpet, crying even louder. "You hit me. You actually hit me. My mom has never hit me." Those nearby all took a step back, whispering about the Gu family's spectacle. Ethan's head throbbed. He wanted his son to shut up, but the boy was wailing so heart-wrenchingly that he couldn't hear a word. He wanted Victoria to yield. Her eyes reddened and her tone sharpened as she said she was already suffering enough being a stepmother, now even the children were crawling all over him. Looking at the scattered mess. For the first time Ethan felt that the world he had longed to return to was so unfamiliar and noisy. At the banquet, the Gu family had lost someone important. Ethan was scolded by his mother Margaret for a long time before she let him go back to his room. Now it was late and quiet. His son's cries and Victoria's complaints seeped through the crack of the door, like two buzzing flies fluttering in his head. He found himself thinking, without realizing it, that if I were there, this wouldn't have happened. Ethan sat up abruptly and lit a cigarette between his fingers. He didn't smoke it, he only sniffed the smell of the cheap tobacco drifting away, carefully. The images he'd deliberately tried to forget exploded in his mind. He remembered the roast duck from South City. 15 yuan for a whole one, the skin roasted until crisp, a bite full of fat, and they would throw in 20 lotus leaf buns and a packet of sweet bean sauce. We could hardly afford meat back then. With a new shop opening promotion, I took a bus for over an hour, sweating all over, clutching it in my arms as I handed it to him. We carefully peeled the duck's skin off, pretending it was a meal worth hundreds, giggling as we tucked in irregular strips of cucumber. Those poor, trivial, irritating everyday things, at that moment they were like rare starlight, flickering in the luxurious, empty room. He remembered the light in my eyes. He remembered, after his amnesia, how I held him gently, saying over and over, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." The familiar warmth and heartbeat. In that moment they made him oddly envious of the man he once was. Those 15 years he had so readily dismissed as coarse now, like a tide, overwhelmed him. His fingertips trembled, the cigarette but fell onto the stall. The weak spark shone for an instant and then went out in the seared hole. He suddenly held his breath, the prick in his chest kept him from moving. The 15 years he had been so eager to escape had become, now, a treasure he could not relinquish. The next morning early, Liam had another tantrum. He simply couldn't adapt to the heavy workload of a wealthy household. The etiquette alone had already worn him down. "Daddy, it hurts everywhere." He flung himself into Ethan's arms, crying off-key. "Can we go back to see Mommy? Mommy can do magic, she just touches and it stops hurting." Before, every time he came back from playing, I would help him massage out the knots. But in the Gu household, nobody cared for him. Maybe because he looked so pitiful, or perhaps because there was some vague, inexplicable thought tucked away in his heart. Ethan cancelled his afternoon meeting and took Liam back to that shabby alley. The alley was still the same alley, mottled walls, the familiar bluestone path. Ethan's heartbeat quickened for no clear reason. He even felt a ridiculous sort of hope. Hope that when he pushed the door open he would see that familiar figure busy in the kitchen. He took out the key he hadn't used in a long time and slid it into the lock. Click. The door opened. But it wasn't him who opened it, an unfamiliar middle-aged man did. The man had a cigarette dangling from his mouth and was shirtless. Seeing Ethan and Liam in the doorway, he frowned impatiently. "Who are you? Who are you looking for?" Ethan was completely stunned, his mind blank. Who are you? How are you here? Who am I? I'm the owner of this house, the man snapped, blowing a ring of smoke. I bought this place from a woman named Sophia a few months ago, the deed's already been processed. Are you guys insane? The woman named Sophia bought the house. The words hit Ethan like a heavy hammer, pounding into his chest until his vision went black. He shoved the man aside and barreled into the house like a madman. The place was no longer how he remembered it. Tacky posters plastered the walls, beer bottles and cigarette butts were tossed about the floor, and the air reeked of a nauseating blend of sweat, smoke, and alcohol. The home he had once scorned but that Sophia had kept spotless had completely vanished. He stormed into the small bedroom, the new furniture, his daughter's clothes, the succulents on the windowsill, everything was gone. He couldn't find anything. Not a trace, not the slightest sign, that I had ever lived there remained. I left him with nothing to hold on to. I boxed up 15 years of memories, along with the shell that carried them, and sold them off clean and decisive. Sophia. He tore into that entirely unfamiliar house, screaming my name hoarsely. His voice held a panic and despair he'd never shown before. He waited for an answer, but the only response was the new owner's impatient curses. "What are you bawling about? If you don't get out, I'm calling the cops." Liam stood stupidly in the doorway. "Home, it's gone. Mom left, she doesn't want me." His tears fell in a staccato rush. Ethan staggered back, leaning against the mottled wall, his heart gripped by an invisible hand so tightly it hurt and he could hardly breathe. He finally believed it. I wasn't sulking, nor playing hard to get. I had truly, uprooted completely, vanished from his world. After leaving that city, I took my mother and daughter to a seaside town. With all our savings, I registered a housekeeping company called Jijing. I provided work for all the women trapped at home. I allowed them time to care for their families and to rest. 1 year later, Jijing's reputation had become very prominent in the industry. I was invited to attend the city's annual business summit. That day, I wore the white suit my daughter had chosen for me and stood under the spotlight speaking confidently. I told my mother's story. I spoke about how hard it is to be a woman. But when my gaze swept over the audience, all I saw were those men's looks of contempt. In the end, I simply had a chair brought up and sat down on the stage. "What do you call me?" "A nanny, a cleaner, someone who does housework, someone who takes out the trash, so what are you?" My question finally quieted the murmurs below. Only then did the corners of my mouth lift. "You are just the ones who tidy up and take out the trash in other fields. The emperor polishes the realm, the merchant polishes their goods, and we polish the floor. Mr. Henry, you still remember the things your household can never find, right? After we put them in place for you, tell me, can you still not find that pair of socks? We charge several times the industry rate, and everyone here accepts that, right? Look, don't I sound like a merchant now, telling you this is worth every penny?" My almost joking tone relaxed everyone. They began to acknowledge what we'd done. The employees who had come with me all breathed easier. After all, to them these efforts had seemed trivial. But in this world, no effort is truly trivial. Thunderous applause from the audience. I rose and bowed gracefully. The confidence I had earned bit by bit gathered around me, radiating light. My speech was labeled as a new way of thinking. It quickly reached Ethan. He stared fixedly at my close-up on the big screen. His eyes swelled with shock, remorse, and an almost viscous disbelief. He repeated my name over and over. His voice was low, audible only to himself. The books I had once held in my hands now replayed clearly before his eyes: Advanced Domestic Management. I had never been putting on an act. I had truly turned doing housework into a proud, legitimate profession. The next day he showed up in my office with a thick letter of intent. Sitting opposite me, Ethan looked uneasy and constrained. Not even the expensive suit he wore could give him a shred of confidence. "Sophia, He wanted to talk about feelings, to offer those belated apologies and regrets. I, however, pressed the intercom directly. "Assistant Chen, come in." I slid his letter of intent for cooperation across to the assistant, my tone all business. "Follow up on Mr. Ethan's cooperation proposal and prepare an assessment report for me." "Understood, boss." I never gave him a single extra glance the whole time. Before he left my office, his steps grew heavier and heavier. He turned back more times than I had begged him not to leave in my past life. Victoria learned that he had come to propose working with me. When Ethan came to see me again, she actually barged into my company as though she were the future mistress of the Gu family and made a scene, calling me a shameless temptress. She had lost her former elegance. Even the disdain that used to gleam in her eyes was replaced by rage. Seeing her behave like a shrew, all the shadows she had cast over me in youth and in my previous life shattered to pieces. I pressed the internal line again. Security? There's a young woman who's emotionally distressed and seriously disrupting our company's normal work order. Please escort her out. I watched Victoria being led out by two tall security guards, her face ashen. Then I turned my gaze to Ethan, whose expression was equally grim. I spoke coldly, "Mr. Ethan, mind your people. Otherwise, I won't hesitate to make Gu Corporation's stock drop a few more points." After the collaboration was turned down, Ethan didn't give up. He actually came up with what he thought was a clever plan and sent Liam to the building beneath my office. When I got off work, I saw that son I hadn't seen in a year, taller by quite a bit, but it seemed his brain hadn't grown at all. He stood at the front door, sobbing. "Mom, I miss you so much. Will you come home with me?" I looked at the big one and the small one, feeling not the slightest ripple. "Ethan, does your little master habitually call everyone he seeks Mom?" "I only have one child, Nora." I turned and took my daughter Nora's hand. Nora wore a miniature version of my professional suit, her hair tied in a neat ponytail, her small face composed and independent. She smiled politely at Ethan, but the words she spoke weren't Dad. "Uncle, tell brother to stop crying. There aren't that many moms in the world, tears only work on your own mother." Nora and I got into the car and left. Ethan stared blankly after our backs. He recalled, in his mind, a daughter just like me, calm and capable. Then he glanced again at his son, crying with snot all over his face. He was completely stunned. Only then did he realize that, without noticing, he had not only lost me but had also turned his children into people from two completely different worlds. When Victoria saw that Ethan still couldn't let go of his old feelings for me, she finally tore off her hypocritical mask. She began to use the Lin family's connections to crush my company at every turn in business. She poached my clients, lured away my employees, and spread rumors about me. Unfortunately for her, the clients she could take were only my short-term partners. As for my staff, she couldn't take a single one. After all, our bonds were those of comrades huddling together for warmth in bitter cold. As for the rumors, I didn't have time to play childish games with her. I held a grand press conference. In front of countless flashing lights, I made public all the evidence of her malicious business tactics, including recordings and contract screenshots. And he announced on the spot that Ji Jing would formally sue the Lin Group for unfair competition, seeking 10 million in damages. The moment the news broke, public opinion erupted. As Victoria's fiancé's family, the Gu Group's stock price fell accordingly. Watching Victoria on TV, hysterical and making a disgraceful spectacle as reporters pressed her, Ethan for the first time felt profound doubt and unease about the choice he had once made. He had thought he was choosing an elegant, proper lady of good family, but once the disguise was stripped away, all that remained was malice and folly. The lawsuit dragged on for a long time. Long enough that I unexpectedly ran into them again at a business cocktail. By then, Victoria had become the joke of our circle. She dumped all her resentment onto me. The moment she saw me, she carried her glass over to me in front of everyone, intent on humiliation. "Sophia, even wearing an imperial robe you'd still look nothing like a crown prince. At heart, aren't you just a servant nanny?" Whispers rose around us. I didn't get angry, instead I smiled and raised my glass, lightly clinking it against hers. "Thank you for the encouragement, Miss Victoria. It helps me never forget where I came from." I paused, watched the smug twist of her face, and kept smiling. "Oh, by the way, forgot to tell you. Mr. Henry from the east side of the city just signed the exclusive housekeeping contracts for all his high-end properties with our company, Ji Jing. He said he just likes a professional, down-to-earth type like me who comes from a nanny background." Victoria's face went as pale as paper in an instant. Because everyone knew that Mr. Henry was precisely her father's biggest business rival. This one deal of mine had almost cut off her father's company's prospects for the entire second half of the year. I took a graceful sip of champagne and, under her murderous stare, turned and walked away. Ethan, in an attempt to win me back, did something that caused a sensation across the city. He actually knelt on one knee outside my company's building, directly beneath my office window, in front of all my employees and passers-by. He was holding the teddy bear I had given him back, his eyes bloodshot and full of regret. "Sophia, I'm sorry, I regret it, please give me one more chance, okay?" The people around were jeering, some even taking out their phones to film. I stood by the office's floor-to-ceiling window, looking down on him. It felt utterly ridiculous and bitterly ironic. If I had known this day would come, why did I act as I did back then? I activated the announcement mic, my voice went out over the PA and reached every ear downstairs clearly. "Director Zhang, there is someone maliciously harassing people at the company entrance, affecting the company's image. Please handle this according to the company's Level 1 emergency protocol." Soon, four well-trained security guards politely surrounded Ethan. "Sir, your behavior has caused a disturbance to our company. Please leave immediately." Ethan picked himself up in a mess under the polite escort of the security guards and the amused stares of the onlookers. He looked up toward my office, his eyes filled with despair. But I didn't speak. In the brief silence, Ethan broke down. He shoved everyone aside and, like a madman, barreled into the building, stopping dead in front of me without regard for anything. He grabbed my arm with frightening strength, his eyes rimmed red as he demanded, "Sophia, do you hate me that much? Do you have to torment me like this to be happy?" I looked at him with eyes as calm as a stagnant pool. If in my past life he had asked me that, I would have hated him so much I would have wished him dead. But now, I found, to my surprise, that I had nothing to hate him for. I will use the most vicious means I can think of to get revenge on him. Make him suffer, be sad, drown in regret, so that even when he thinks of me he wishes he could stab himself to death. That is what will make me happy. Mr. Ethan, don't ask such childish things. You're not even worth my hatred. Besides being the heir of the Gu family, what else do you have? And soon, even that status would be gone to him. Ethan's strength drained at once, he staggered back a step, the color leaching from his face. At that moment, Liam ran out from behind him, crying as he clung to my leg. "Mom, I'm sorry. Come home with us. I won't make you angry again." I lowered my head and ran my fingers through his hair, my touch gentle but my gaze resolute. "Liam, a man must take responsibility for his choices. You chose Dad back then, so you have to accept the consequences now. You can come see me anytime, or come live with Mom and your sister. But that home is gone." After Ethan returned to the Gu family, he resolutely announced that he was breaking off his engagement to Victoria, and before his press conference was even over, the Lin family had already sent out a notice annulment of the engagement. There was no reason given. Because the Gu family had gone bankrupt. I did it. After all, working as a housekeeper always put me in contact with many people. They appreciated my knowledge and experience. And the evidence I provided of the Gu family's illegal activities was all verified one by one. As long as I still had value, the Gu family would never be able to stand again. The overthrow of the entire clan sent Margaret into a fury, and she drove Ethan out of the family. Without the Gu family's protection, even Ethan's basic livelihood became a problem. He began, bit by bit, to feel what it was like to be petty and small-minded, things he had once dismissed. Until one day, he was fighting with someone at the wet market over discarded vegetables. The two of them hurled the vilest insults at each other. When he looked up, he realized the other person was Victoria. It turned out that after the Gu family's fall, the Lin family soon collapsed as well. To feed her household, Victoria had to do whatever she could. But they had been raised in luxury and had no idea how to live like ordinary people. Even if she worked 3 jobs a day, she couldn't keep them afloat. The Lin family all insisted it was Victoria who had put them into this life. To avoid those wolfish relatives marrying her off for a bride price, she could only scrimp and save. At that moment, all their hauteur and self-righteousness were utterly shattered. But I could no longer hear their apologies. My company Zhejiang successfully went public. At the grand bell-ringing ceremony, a reporter asked, "Miss Sophia, could you share the secret of your success? What sustained you from being an ordinary domestic worker to where you are today?" My gaze passed over the countless flickering camera flashes and landed on the corpse of my past life, lying in a pool of blood with no one reaching out to help. My voice was clear and strong. What dragged me into the mire was naivety, what pulled me out was courage. But I am fortunate, I have one life I can use to understand all of this. To understand that a woman's confidence never comes from whom she married, but from who she ultimately becomes. The voice cut through the crowd. I seemed to see that figure in the pool of blood slowly rise to her feet. The work clothes, smeared with filth, had become her hardest armor. In the end, that face actually took on the likeness of my daughter Nora. I thought, my fate will never befall my daughter.